Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's another edition of the MSP Initiative Live. It's Tuesday, right? That's right. We keep on. It's almost the end of the year, and I'm just about done worrying about what day of the week it is, and we'll worry about 2021. Today, I have a guest with me from Threatlocker, and I want to give him an opportunity to introduce himself. So, for anyone that doesn't know, take it away. Why don't you go ahead and give him a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm Danny Jenkins. I'm the CEO of Threatlocker, and I'm kind of a bit of a security guru. I've worked a lot of years in enterprise security, white hat hacking, and just all sorts of kind of anything security related. So,
That's interesting. Why don't you actually give people a little bit of your history, though, right? So you left university and you decided to get into white hat hacking, or how did you get started?
so I skipped the uni part, and I started at school where there was people I didn't like, so I wrote some malware to delete their files from their floppy disks, and I guess that was the beginning of it. And then I kind of, it wasn't security back then; it was just IT. So I started in the IT world, and that eventually evolved into security. Because if you work in IT now, if you don't work in security, you're crying in the corner because your customers are in trouble. I ended up working in the corporate enterprise, multinational company. There, I was kind of responsible for traveling around the world, making sure all of the divisions of the company, all of the other IT departments were doing what they needed to protect the organization and protect the data. From there, I founded a email security company, which in Ireland called MX Sweep. Ran that for a few years, sold out, and I think they later on sold to J2 Software, which is now FuseMail, I believe. And then founded another email security company, this time more focused on the technology and the white label side, sold that out again. Then did a lot of penetration testing, white hat stuff, before, after banging my head against the wall, telling people to use better controls, and everyone was telling me it was too hard. So then decided to found Threatlocker about 5 years ago. I think we decided that. Wasn't called Threatlocker back then. It was an awful name, which from there just worked with MSPs. We have well over 1,000 MSPs now that we partner with, and get to see a lot of scary stuff.
Yeah, that's very very interesting because we're in an interesting time right now where it sounds like you're on the other side of the ocean, but obviously we're still in the middle of trying to sort out an election here in the U.S. and we're hearing a lot about white hat hackers and voting machines and website registration pages and like the whole hacking thing, right? It just knows no bounds, right? Doesn't matter what industry, what system, what vertical, everybody's open to it, right?
Yeah, well, I'm right now. I'm actually in Florida. I just have that really strong Michigan accent still, so people confuse me from the other side of the ocean. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't, and that's the thing. It used to be, if someone was going to get in your house, if someone was going to get in your business, they'd take a crowbar and break the window and take down, steal the computers or steal the goods or the money from the safe or whatever they wanted to. Now that there's some 400-pound guy sitting in Ukraine. Press a few buttons and you come in on Monday morning and you're gone. I mean, your business can just be gone overnight because some guy in Ukraine decided to pick on you.
So let's zoom out for a second, right? So you're working with a lot of MSPs. You said about 1,000. Security, right? I mean, we just keep on throwing more and more tools on it, right? We try and train people on, hygiene, right? Computer hygiene, right? Don't click on stuff you don't know. Don't open up attachments to people you don't know. Don't go to websites of people you don't know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But to some degree, the human being is still the weakest link, right? Yeah, the person that's in between the chair and the keyboard, right? Regardless of whatever software that you have. Even the government gets hacked. Nobody's 100%. We all know this. So as MSPs who are largely dealing with companies that are not Fortune 100s, right? Usually, let's call it 250 employees and below, right? All the way down to maybe one, in some cases. There's a math problem, right? Because there's only so many dollars to go around. Everybody understands that security is a thing, but they don't have the resources that the big boys do. Yet they're targeted because they're easy to get to. So it's a double-edged sword. And as service providers in the industry who are trying to provide good practical consulting, provide good, day-to-day ongoing technology services, where does it end, right? How do you know how to slice up your dollars to best address security? Because everybody's coming out with something new every day to address this little piece or that little piece. There doesn't seem to be a one-stop fits all. Not that anything in technology land is. And I'm just trying to understand where the biggest threat is. We've had people on before who said like almost 90% of security breaches come from email. Do you agree with that statement?
It's probably a little bit high, but it's certainly a big number. I think the thing is you're right. That small businesses don't have the dollars. They don't have the budget, but until they need the budget to get their data back, and then suddenly they can come up with $250,000. And here's where we are different.
Well, hold on. Let me counter you on that one point. A lot of the time, the insurance company's paying that $250,000. It's not money out of their pocket.
Have you ever seen 100% insurance paid out on anything? I mean, no. The tree came down on my house. It cost 45 grand. I got 20. So I'm not convinced that. The problem is quite often is they don't necessarily even get the data back, and we won't even get into the U.S. Treasury rate restrictions that just got added on sanctions on some of these places. But the thing is, 10 years ago, you're a big enterprise, and you had to worry about two types of attack. You had to worry about someone sending you malware or random malware coming in your inbox, or you downloading it from a web page, or someone finding an open relay on the internet and sending spam from your server. You had to worry about those. But you also had to worry about someone taking the time to use a rubber ducky, hop from one user to another, document your environment, and really focus and target on you. And in the last 10 years, the last decade, we've seen, as an MSP, as a small business, you had to worry about the scattered attacks. You had to worry about the blanket attacks that affected everyone. You didn't have to worry about the targeted attacks. Now we see all these small businesses, the cyber criminals have realized, if I spend 2 or 3 days targeting you, finding out who you do business with, spoofing email addresses, going from one machine to another, rather than you just opening an email and happening to get everything, I can actually still make 250 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, $1 million from you without, and you don't have all the security. And, everyone's vulnerable, but which house are you going to break into? The one that's got no locks on the door and the one that's got no house alarm, or are you going to break into the one that looks like Fort Knox? So as an MSP, you guys have had to suddenly step up and start delivering enterprise services. And the approach has far too often been throw more at it. And you're right. You just say, we keep throwing more at it. But here's the thing. And if you look at a lot of MSP security stack, it revolves around an antivirus, an EDR, threat hunting, MDR, whatever, and a next-gen threat detection in the email, next-gen threat detection on the web. And they keep throwing this at it. But essentially what's happening here is you're adding more and more layers of detection, but they're all using very similar algorithms. So you're essentially putting 3 house alarms in your house, maybe a motion sensor, maybe a contact sensor, maybe a glass breaking sensor, but the front doors aren't locked. And and that's kind of the challenge with security. If you just, I remember in my last email security company, we had 14 antiviruses. And we didn't have 14 antiviruses because it was good to have 14 antiviruses. I'm going to say something I probably shouldn't say now. We had 14 antiviruses because MSPs love to hear that you had more. And they felt safer when you have more. But I never, in 5 years of running that business, saw one file get past the third antivirus that get stopped by anything past the second or the third antivirus that wasn't stopped going forward. If it didn't get detected by the first 2 or 3, it was never going to get detected. And the reality is, you can only detect so much. You can't detect everything. So if you approach security in the way of, I'm just going to throw more detection at it, you're never going to win.
That's a fair point. I mean, we see, like 4 years ago, we started seeing SOC and SIEM and all these like enterprise level MSSPs, if that's what you want to call it, security providers come downstream, and really wasn't even affordable at the time 4 years ago. Now it's been brought down in price point, right? There's a lot of players trying to offer SOC as a service, security as a service, as third-party vendors. And obviously they're trying to hook into all your tools, right? Whatever antivirus you're using, whatever firewall you're using, whatever UTM you're using, whatever, DNS filtering you're using, right? They're trying to tie into all your tools to like look at the logs and figure out hey, this, you had a problem, you just didn't know it, here it is, whether it's Office 365 or whatever. But the problem, to your point, is, back in the day, 10 years ago, where you had all those 14 antiviruses, the network was pretty easy, right? Like, there was a corporate office, there was a firewall at the edge of the corporate office. Some people work remote, but not a lot. We flipped it now, right? Like, most of the people are now working from home. They don't even have what used to be just the basics, right? They're using whatever the router that their internet provider gave them. And which opens up the, a whole can of worms. But many people have said, whether it's the people that go to DEF CON every year or whatever, they can get past an enterprise firewall pretty fast. So, I mean,
malware. I mean, that's, and whether it's through email, and yes, email is a very easy way of getting data into the organization, whether it's email to a web link or whether it's email to something else, or whether it's through Zoom or Teams or USB drive or rubber ducky or Facebook ad, there's a million ways that data can get in there. And the firewall has one purpose, and it's not to stop you getting breached, it's to stop TCP IP traffic getting into your network that isn't intended to get into your network. And there is no magic firewall, even having a good UTM with various levels of web filtering and phishing filtering and packet inspection and IDS and things like that is good, but it's not going to stop someone downloading an email and opening up a TeamViewer link that allows an attacker onto the inside of your network. It's just, and your antivirus isn't going to stop that either, because TeamViewer is not even considered bad. I mean, maybe, and it doesn't matter what. And the point is you can't detect everything from the perimeter. You have to detect closer to the source, closer to the asset, and closer to what has access to the asset. And to your point, 80% of people now are working from home. Maybe I can't even keep track anymore. It depends on, if you're in California, it's more like 95. But it's, and if we see that we've now got all of these people, there's two problems. One is they're outside the perimeter, but the perimeter protection is not that great anyway. But the other problem is, I'm trying to think of a nice way of saying this, they're not as educated. If I send you a Zoom link now, it's a Zoom link. I mean, I can't imagine I'd send you a fake Zoom link. You just wouldn't.
I've seen them.
You'd probably click on it. You probably wouldn't click on it. But I mean, these Zoom emails that come around saying your meeting's about to begin, click here to join the meeting, and you download it. It gives you a site that looks exactly like Zoom. You open that zoom.exe and malware is now running on your machine. Someone's into your machine. There's so many different ways to get in. And the difference is now, not only have we taken so much outside the protection of the perimeter, we've asked people who are not used to using these tools, who go into the office every day and open QuickBooks and type in numbers and frankly don't even struggle to use the Windows calculator. They use their hard-coded calculator on the side of their desk to suddenly join a Zoom meeting, and their head's going to explode because they don't know how to do it. So they just click on these links.
So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of tools out there, right, that check your links as much as possible, whether it be emails, whether it be attachments, whether it be something coming through Messenger. Some of them, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. A lot of people are like, oh, second opinion scanner, right? I have my primary antivirus, and then I have some secondary engine that, checks, something that they don't. Some people say, hey, the whole concept of, expect everything isn't secure, right? And then work back up from, hey, I'm only going to start going to places that I know are okay. It all sounds great. The end user experience really varies, by the way, because one of the pushbacks from the MSP space on security is, hey, it's all great and well, but I just want to be able to do what I need to do. And I have to now go through 30 more steps to get to the same place. I don't want this stuff anymore, right? Like, even just getting people to, do multi-factor would seem to have been a huge challenge, because they didn't want that extra step until you explained, hey, when your bank account's wiped out, you're going to really wish you had this little button that you press. I don't know what else to tell you. So what's the, let's work backwards, because that's how I like to do things. Where should MSP spend the most time in terms of trying to do the blocking and tackling that'll prevent the obvious front door issues of security? Because obviously, unless we start working from there, right? Hey, what's totally secure, and let's work backwards from there and figure out what we can get done with the budgeting that we have and with the people that we're working with. Where explain to the people out there, what are the obvious things that you would expect them to start fixing today, to make sure that their front door isn't, literally unlocked, waiting for the next bad guy to come in.
So, and this is where I bring the enterprise skill set into this. So if we go back to how enterprise actually deals with security in the MSP world, the common approach to security is someone opened a piece of malware, get an antivirus or get an EDR or and then when that doesn't work, get a better one, or add threat hunting or add an MDR and then add a SOC, and they just keep adding. We're going to find this, we're going to detect this bad guy. But essentially that's like standing in a room trying to figure out who's good and who's bad. If someone's wearing a ski mask, maybe you don't trust them, but if you're wearing a mask nowadays, it's probably a good thing. But you're standing in the room and you're trying to figure out who's good and bad. The enterprise approach is slightly different. If you think about somebody, let's use email as an example. It could come in from anywhere, but think about somebody gets a piece of email. They get a resume in a Word document. There's 3 ways you can stop that threat from happening, and I like to call it like a security triangle. There's the human element. You train the user not to open it. You can't fix stupid. You just can't. But you can improve a little bit dumb. And you can so you can reduce your odds. And we do cyber training and phishing training and all kind of things like that in the country, in the company. But you can't, ultimately you're getting that number down from 40% of people opening to maybe 10%. Right. So that's the first way you can stop it. The other way you can stop it is you can hope that your antivirus detects it or your threat hunting detects it post breach. So we call that the detection side of the triangle. And essentially you just close your eyes, bury your hand in the sand and hope it's going to work. And it may work and it may not work. The enterprise approach is slightly different. They use that detection, but they're saying that's my double check method. We're going to deny by default. So when they open that Word document and it tries to download something from the internet, a program, and the Word document can open, but if it downloads a program and that program tries to run on your machine, we're not going to ask, is that good or bad? We're not going to say, is this a known virus? Does this look like a virus? Does it act suspiciously? Because we don't care. As an enterprise, I've employed you to do a job. Your job, it requires you to use QuickBooks, Google Chrome, Microsoft Office, Adobe Reader, maybe something else. That's your job. If it's not on that list of programs, if that hash isn't in that database, then deny it. Now you end up with this situation where you're not guessing anymore. You're not hoping the user doesn't open it, hoping the antivirus doesn't detect it. Because when you do that, eventually you fail. And you're saying, I'm in control as the MSP of what runs. If the user needs new software, they request it. And in the enterprise world, that's very difficult. In the MSP world, Threatlocker makes that easy. They request it. You say, okay, this is a new application. We're going to approve this. We know what it is, and we're going to approve it. What we've done is taken the user out of it because they can't make the decision anymore, because if it's not on the list, it can't run. They've taken the detection away. Now, the detection's still there. It's still there as the buffer. So when you as the MSP makes a mistake and permits something you shouldn't, now hopefully you don't, but there are some MSPs that might do crazy things when they're drinking on a Friday evening or something. But if you deny by default, that's the kind of enterprise mentality, is take that permission away. And there's 2 advantages to that. As an MSP, you typically see one tech per about 200 endpoints, maybe 100 to 200 endpoints. And you might correct me if I'm wrong on that, but you'll see about one tech.
I've seen some people who are super automation and they're like 600-700 to the one engineer, but everything is scripted to the hilt. Like you can't even sneeze without having a script. And then you got, the guys who are muscling their way through. And yeah, I'd say like 200 to 300 is about right.
Yeah. If you notice as you get into enterprise, the numbers get lower, less techs. And the reason for that is because you get less problems. And when you implement proper security, at the moment, as an MSP, you have to deal with tickets for my PC's running tow, tickets my disk went out of space, tickets I've got a piece of malware, and they're the worst tickets because they take a long time to recover. Tickets because there's a security alert come from SentinelOne or whatever the antivirus EDR product is. You've got all these tickets piling up. But if you actually implement a default deny to begin with, imagine you send out a computer, 5 years later, you get that computer back to replace it. it looks exactly like you did when you sent it out. And
Probably got some wear and tear, but I hear what you're saying.
yeah, you don't have 15 Chrome extensions that are eating the CPU and adding to memory. You don't have adware running and 4 different browsers because the user got bored one day. And if you do, it's because you decided that we're making a business decision, or the customers decided that we want to use this browser. What you have is a PC that's delivered to do the job. Now, of course, if you're a developer, that's not necessarily ideal, but for 99% of the population, and I'm a developer, and I use default deny on my PC. So, but for 99% of the population, they use a handful of apps. And if you're tracking the updates, if Threatlocker is tracking the updates for those apps for you, so you don't have to worry about updates being blocked. If the approval process when they do need a new app is 30 seconds from a phone or from an email, what you end up with is computers that are designed to do a certain function, have a certain amount of software, suddenly aren't running out of space because there's loads of stuff installed and Dropbox is downloading things because Dropbox isn't on them unless you need it. And you're really hardening your environment, and you're reducing the tickets on this side from your EDR because there's less going on to trigger alarms. You're reducing your PC's gone slow, my hard disk has run out, this has gone wrong, because the user is just saying, I need to permit new software. They request access, you approve it, and no malware can. I mean, look, nothing's impossible, but hundreds of thousands of endpoints at this point. And we've never, ever had a client who wasn't in a monitoring only state that had malware. Like, period. Now, that's not to say it's impossible. I mean, theoretically is, but there's nothing impossible. I'm not stupid. And we tie it in with the ring fencing to control what applications can do and the storage. And but if you start with deny, you just end up in a much, much better scenario, and your computers are cleaner. Your users give you less tickets. You have less problems.
But can't you accomplish that by just not giving people administrative rights, local or otherwise, onto their machines? I mean, if they can't install it, then likely whatever's trying to install it also doesn't have permission to it, right? Am I missing?
Well, you can install Google Chrome without being an admin. You can install ransomware without being an admin. You can install extensions. You can install Dropbox without being an admin. You don't have to be an admin to install anything anymore. I mean, these vendors want their software to be installed. So even the good vendors, TeamViewer, you don't need to be an admin to install it. Like, all of these apps can run under the local user context, which is great. But it now means, I mean, being an admin is not even a special privilege anymore.
Well, I mean, all right. So yeah, I get it. They're running in a mode where it's not totally installed, but it's not, but it's running, right?
Profile, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So your position is, unless it's approved, don't let it run. That's what shortening up what you just said. It's, unless I gave you permission to have that Chrome extension or that application running or that executable launch, you're saying we're going to tell the machine, don't let that happen.
Don't let it happen. Yeah. Now, the onboarding is a bit more complex in that it has to auto learn, it has to figure out your environment, it has to catalog it, and we have to deal with updates. But that's the essentials of it. Is if it's not on the list of applications, and normally MSPs are building lists at a global level, so they don't have to do it for every client, and they're building lists automatically. They're building lists on a customer level. So you're not talking about, oh, Bob asked for Zoom because suddenly it's March 2020 and he needs Zoom for the first time. So now I'm allowing it for Bob, and then Cindy asked for Zoom and I'm allowing it for Cindy. You're saying, okay, I'm just allowing Zoom. So we're not talking about every single environment, but if it's not on the list, don't let it run. And then it doesn't matter if it's known malware, no malware. It doesn't matter if someone's trying to weaponize TeamViewer against you, or just installing garbageware on their computer, or adware, or stupid Chrome extensions that change their browser pink. I mean, Chrome extensions can see your passwords. Google removed over 500 of them from the Chrome store in January. I mean, think about that. You use LastPass, you log in, and it says, do you want to save your password? Chrome doesn't ask if you want to let LastPass see your password. LastPass can see it straight away. Passportal. You have a business need for that. But guess what? So can Honey see your passwords. So can every other Chrome extension you install. So and everything you're doing, you're adding vulnerabilities into your surface area. So keep it clean, keep it simple. Your machines will run faster, users will be happier, and if they need new software, they can request it.
So so then I think part of the challenge though, and what you're explaining is, generally speaking, in corporate environments, this is expected, right? Like the machines are locked down, like when you get issued it, like you said, it's very narrow to their role. But in small business world, that's not the case, right? These people are downloading stuff galore. Maybe their work machines are dubbed as quasi-personal. So they're, using stuff at night different than during the day. And it could also be that a lot of these people, now that they're remote, right? The machines aren't even company issued, right? They're not even, some people are using non-work devices to do work stuff. So how do we, there's got to be a middle ground though, right? Because, the pushback you always get from the end user is, I don't want to have to call you every single time I want to install something. You're coming back saying, I want you to be secure. I don't want you to put something on there that you don't know, or have something installed on there that you didn't even know was getting installed, right? So where's that middle of the road from an experience standpoint?
So, and if users aren't admins anyway, they're not intended to be able to install things. So, and users shouldn't be installing something every day. I mean, software has licensing, it needs patching. There's lots of considerations as a business. WinZip is not free, despite what the industry believes. So, if from that point of view, users should not be installing it. And from an experience point of view, where we see how MSPs have deployed this, and we see MSPs who have deployed this across 2,000 seats, and there are no exceptions. We've seen MSPs who have taken a 80-20 approach, where they say 80% of my users are going to benefit from this, and 20% aren't going to benefit from this, or they're going to benefit from some of the other concepts. Because look, if I send you a program now, if you download Angry Birds on your computer, Angry Birds has access to all of your files. It doesn't care if you're an admin or not. It can see all of your network shares. It can encrypt them. It can copy them. It can steal them. So when you download those Russian games, just think about that. So the best way to stop that is don't let anything run that doesn't need to run. But if you do want to allow things to run, ring fence it. And that sometimes is a middle ground. So we're saying, okay, I'm going to allow this app, but it's only allowed to run as ring fence, so it can't access my files. So if it goes rogue, it can't see my data. At least it can destroy my machine, but it can't see my data.
So I've never actually heard the term ring fence. I don't know why. I get the concept, right? It's almost like you install an app on your iPhone and it says, do you want this Facebook app to be able to see your photos? Yes or no? No, right? So you're trying to not allow it past just the usage phase, right? You're not letting it use your location. You're not letting it use your photos. You're not letting it use your microphone or your camera unless you specifically allow it access to do that. Is this the concept when you say ring fencing?
Yeah. So, and we're looking at, can it access your documents? Can it access network shares? And what types of documents? So maybe Angry Birds needs to access these files in this folder only, and we can allow that, but we can't allow it to access, or maybe a picture viewer can only open pictures. So if you say Zoom, let me take Zoom as an example. It had a vulnerability earlier this year. If it couldn't access your files, if it's ring fenced, that vulnerability was moot. It didn't mean anything. So there's internet access, there's registry access, but there's also other application access. So take Zoom again, take Internet Explorer last year. A vulnerability allowed it to run PowerShell commands without any click from the user. No malware, just PowerShell commands. And I don't care how fast your EDR, how fast your SOC can run. A solid state drive nowadays can encrypt files so damn fast. Good luck with that. And copy files. I mean, take the rubber ducky. I mean, we run this demo with these rubber duckies, and here's one here, and it types at 1,000 words a minute, and it can run a PowerShell command to upload your data to the internet. We demonstrate it all the time. This one here is a OMG cable. You can actually program this remotely. I've seen so many hospitals get hacked by these car dealers. It's unbelievable. Someone plugs it in, they can connect to a Wi-Fi hotspot on it, and now they can send keystrokes to your keyboard. No malware involved, not going to get detected. But if you ring fence applications like PowerShell, and you say, okay, PowerShell needs to do a lot on my machine. I use it for scripting. I use it for making system updates. So it needs admin privileges, but it doesn't really need access to my network shares or my documents folder. So I'm going to stop it doing that. So if you can ring fence those applications, you can harden it. Of course, the perfect scenario, I mean, there's 4 states to any application. Denied, that's the safest state. If it's denied, it can't do you any harm. There's ring fence, which means I'm going to give it access to only what it needs access to. There's allowed without any restrictions. So it can see my data, it can copy my files, it can do whatever it wants. And then there's elevated to an administrator. Those are the 4 states of any application. You always want to be on the lowest possible state you can be. Deny being the best, ring fence being the second. You don't want to be allowing your applications to run fully. And look, it doesn't matter how good your antivirus is, and you can't detect every threat. I saw an MSP recently. Their customer called them up. They called Threatlocker. They asked for a demo, and the reason they asked for a demo not was because of ransomware, which is the normal reason people call us, but their customer called them up and started yelling down the phone at them, saying, "Why are you looking at my passwords?" This MSP is scratching his head saying, "What are you talking about? Are you on drugs? Are you?" And there's a very hysterical woman saying, "Why are you looking at my passwords?" Someone had spoofed the MSP's email address. Take this as a note. If you've got an L in your domain name, go and register it with an I, because a capital I in Outlook looks exactly the same as an L. Right, go and do that now and set up DMARC so no one can send email from it. Someone had sent an email from the MSP's email address, spoofed it with an I instead of an L, asked the user, said there was a problem with our Screen Connect server. Can you click on this TeamViewer link? They clicked on TeamViewer and the attacker just started looking at the saved passwords in Chrome straight away. TeamViewer didn't need to run in that environment. The MSP didn't use TeamViewer. The customer didn't use TeamViewer. So if it hadn't been allowed, that attack would have been gone. The antivirus, the EDR didn't pick it up. None of it was malware.
Well, there's a couple good pieces of advice right there. Double check your domain names and buy any of the cousin domain names that could look like it. I mean, there's a lot out there, right? But
yeah, if you've got two L's, it gets really complicated because you've got multiple combinations now.
Interesting. So how hard, like, so obviously part of what you do is this, right? This zero trust idea, right? Where you have to assume everything's closed until you open it up, which is the reverse of what's, happening today. Why not use local security policies, group policy, Microsoft Azure policies to implement some of this stuff? Is that realistic or no?
So if you asked me 5 years ago, why not use them? I would have said, if you're not using them, don't be you're stupid. Now, there's two reasons. The pushback I got 5 years ago, it's just too hard. If you're a big enterprise and you've got 500 machines or 5,000 machines or 500,000 machines that look the same and an army of people to build the policies, great. But as an MSP where every customer is running different policies, just building those policies is going to set you back 2 years of manpower. Like, it's not even viable. And that would have been the biggest reason, I would have said 2 years ago. Now, 2017 came along, and then RMM started getting breached and all of these other things. And then there's another big reason. Azure software restriction policies, AppLocker, whatever product you want to use, it's focused around the user level. So it's focused around a user making a mistake. WannaCry in 2017 used an exploit and ran at the system level, at the kernel level. Your RMM getting exploited. And bear in mind, I can't stress this enough. Just because you have dual factor on your RMM doesn't mean someone can't compromise an API key. API keys do not use dual factor. So if one of your API keys get compromised, they can create a script directly through the API and send out a malicious package. So API key is really important to look after. Step point one. But again, if it gets pushed out through your RMM, that runs under the system, not at the user level. So
time out for a second. Let's revisit that for a second. So obviously there are the major RMMs out there. I mean, even Microsoft's quasi rolled out Lighthouse as the beginning of their own RMM, but let's put that one off to the side for a second. How often should you be changing your API keys out? And a lot of the times when you create these API keys, the matrix of what they need access to doesn't exist. It's just, hey, we need an API key, go here, create it, add it to this panel, and all of a sudden the wheel spins. So what's your best advice on that front? Because I'm going to tell you right now, we all have them because all these third-party tools tie together through the RMM, right? Or the PSA. So what's your advice there?
So depending on the how granular they can get, and like you said, there's not enough granularity. There's starting to be more on those API keys, but depending on how granular, API keys that should only be used if they're absolutely needed, especially at full admin level. And when you do have them, I mean, you've got to protect where they're stored. And if you have to assume that your machines, your IT guys, I mean, look, we do phishing testing on our techs, and sometimes they make mistakes, and that scares the crap out of me. And these are all security people, and we drill in security like you can't imagine. But you have to say, well, what's the likelihood of my guys getting compromised? And it's a lot higher than you think. Like making sure they're storing these things on sticky notes and in Notepad and Excel, web config files, all of these are potentially bad. And then the partner you give them to as well. I mean, if you get an API key, is the partner SOC 2 certified? Like, I mean, that doesn't mean that they're secure necessarily, but it means they've taken steps towards security. How much do I trust their security? Because I've given them this. If they get compromised, someone could get my API key and then they can use that against me. So they're all factors. Change them out as frequent as you can, just like passwords. I mean, I don't want to give you a more headache and more work to do, but if you are using them, change them out. And when you change them out, be very, very careful. And we have a video. I had a friend that, well, I'll get into that in a second, that you don't copy and paste these things in a clipboard while you're connected to somebody's machine. Like, just do not. I mean, password managers are great, but I managed to not steal, with their consent. I went, a friend of mine in the UK asked me, said he was really secure. So within 24 hours, I had his RMM password and I had him running malware on his machine, fake malware that just went boo, but that's not the point. I did it because he was connected to my machine and using his client tool. And I managed to get his RMM password and about 7 other passwords. So when you're using those password managers, be really careful about what you copy into your Windows clipboard, because every single application you're running, including screen sharing tools, can share that clipboard and can see that data. So just be careful when you change them. Make sure you change them in the most secure way on a secure machine, and you keep that data limited. Hell, type them in. Like, it's a pain in the backside, but sometimes typing them in is just the better way of doing it, and making sure that they can't be compromised, because they are dangerous. And I had a client recently, someone got into their RMM, Threatlocker client, API key was compromised. They pushed out ransomware to all of their endpoints. Thankfully, 98% of them were running Threatlocker, and the ones that weren't that serious. And we just saw in the audit, deny, all the way down their entire customer base. And just because of an RMM key being compromised.
So lesson here is, if you haven't changed your API keys in years, might want to go back and flush them out, and maybe have to go back. And I mean, I've definitely seen notices within the last 90 days where all of a sudden out of nowhere, they're like, hey, you should go and double check your API key permissions. I assume this is in result to this conversation. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, and lots of people, no one wants to tell you that they had a breach. So just change them out, make sure they're changed frequently and limited where you can, and delete the ones that aren't being used. Same applies to firewall rules. I make a point every single month, we go into our firewalls and we do a review of rules, asking what are they there for. We have very few rules. And do we really need that? And if you do that on your firewalls, it just as a frequent, it's a 5-minute job, and it can really help someone done something dumb one day.
Yeah, I doubt those are being I doubt every UTM list rules being reviewed every month. I'm pretty accurate on that, I think. All right, so I took you off course, right? You went API keys. Go back to where we started. You were talking about not everything has to run with user permissions, right? You were talking about Azure and the rules around everything being targeted at the user, and that not every executable runs at the user level, right? It could run at the system level.
Yeah. So, and software restriction policies, it's a great technology, but it's limited. And like everything in Windows, I mean, I use PC Paint, but I'm not a photographer, so I'll draw boxes on it sometimes, and it does the job. But it's very, very limited. It also doesn't control what applications can do. So there's running under the system count, that's not going to help you. Running at the kernel level, it's not going to help you. But also, it's not going to stop PowerShell uploading your files to the internet, because unless you block PowerShell completely, and it's very hard to do that because so many applications need it to run, it's not going to stop RunDLL or RedServe connecting out to the internet and downloading a payload. These are policies that are intended to stop a user opening a program. That is an IT management policy that goes towards security, but it's not really security focused. It's about stopping users do bad stuff. And I always advocated for it, but it was very, very hard. It's very difficult to manage. It's very difficult to approve something. And it's not running at the kernel level. And I can't stress that enough. Run it at the kernel level and control what these applications can do.
Interesting. So what about the over-the-top apps, right, that are just running, but they're not actually installed, right? Like, you when you download, I downloaded a network scanner this morning. It's like, you want to install this, or you just want to run it in memory and then close out and it's gone? What about that situation?
Yeah, well, that's the same. I mean, that will get blocked by any half decent application control because it's not going to be allowed. And there's another good point. We had a client recently. We have a approval service where we manage approvals for some of the smaller MSPs that don't have the 24-hour help desk, where somebody hits request and we get the request and we look at it and say, oh, do we want to do it? We had a recent case where we call them the cyber heroes, got the request, and someone was trying to run an IP scanner on a server at 2 a.m. in the morning. And it was like, that doesn't look good. So they actually hunted out for cell phone numbers for MSPs. And it's like, we haven't been given any instruction to call. We're not allowing it, obviously. But we want to kind of let somebody know that someone's trying to run an IP scanner on their server at 2 a.m. in the morning. There's a legitimate tool that will not get detected by your antivirus. And it can be used very, very heavily and very easily to transmit in your environment.
I tell you what, I hadn't thought about it until you actually brought it up in this call, that the bad guys could be using the off-the-shelf software that you're using every day. Like, I didn't even, I'm always thinking they're using some sort of bad plugin, or they're using some sort of, something that they coded manually, or some sort of, whatever, right? But if they're just using commercially available, kind of freemium based stuff, man.
Well, I mean, I saw a large law firm. They had all of their files encrypted. Somebody sent them a Word document, had a macro in it, turned on BitLocker. No malware, no software, just turned on BitLocker and encrypted their hard drives. And then they sent them an email saying, do you want your BitLocker keys back?
They're literally just turned on BitLocker and then said, hey, we literally used your own software against you. If you want to unencrypt, it's not like they use some third-party custom encryption tool. It's just BitLocker.
Yeah, and they didn't even use a macro. It was a link in a Word document that piped in a command to PowerShell that turned on BitLocker. I mean, that is...
It's like using your own ammunition against you. I never even thought about that.
There's so many good tools that can get used against you, and then there's so many bad tools, and then there's custom tools. Like, when I was doing white hat stuff, I was always writing my own malware. So I had a piece of malware that what it would do is it copy, replace. Like, say I want to get it after you, George, and you don't open email attachments because you're smart. So what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to go to someone else in your company who maybe isn't so smart, and I'm going to send them an email. They're going to open it, but they didn't have access to your data. I need your data. So what I would often do in the white hat stuff is replace files on the file share with EXEs. And we share all this code. If you ever watch one of our hacking classes, it would replace the file on the file share with an EXE from an Excel file, Excel icon still on it. Of course, file extensions are normally hidden. So then it would open when you open that EXE, it would open the original Excel file. So I would go into one of your co-workers and get into them, switch files out on your file server, and then you just go into the file server to open your monthly financials. You double click on it and the financials are open. You don't know anything, only I've now got access to your machine too.
Wow. So how does that work in that example, right? Like, let's say you're using Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox or some variant of that. Permissions within those folders would apply here, right? Like, if that other employee that you spoofed or you got them to click on something doesn't have access to that financial file, that would have stopped that, right?
No, yeah, but that's the point. The other employee didn't have access. But what they did have access to was something public. So something more shared, like a common share, maybe a staff vacations, or there's a whole bunch of files that are used, that you use, that he uses or she uses, and we switch out those files. And now when you open those files, I now have access to your machine. So I'm running under your context, and I can now, and these don't need to run as an admin. They run as local users. I can see all your data. So everything that you can access, I can now access. And you see how quickly in an organization this stuff spreads. And OneDrive is another example. I see this used a lot. Someone fishes an Office 365 account, and then they'll go into the company OneDrive and replace the documents with EXEs. And then they sync down to everyone's computer and then click.
Wow. It's like using OneDrive against you.
Yeah, like, I mean, and there's so many ways to get, and you mentioned at the beginning, there's so much stuff comes through email, but there's so many other ways to get data threats into an organization, and they get used. And the thing is in the old days, it was like, you probably wouldn't have got hit. because if they got your password, they'd log into your account and send loads of pornographic email out to everyone. And you'd have to apologize to everyone saying, someone got my account. Now they get in and they say, okay, I'm in this guy's account. Let's go into his OneDrive and see if the company uses it. Let's put some files in there. Oh, George just clicked on this file. Now I have access to his computer. Oh, he has access to the server. I just seen him logged on. I've put a key log on his machine. He's just logged onto the server. I'm going to log in there. Oh, he logged into the backup too. Great. Now I've got the backup as well. And suddenly your files are encrypted. And here's the thing. They don't just encrypt your files. They take it. All of your files get copied and then they sell it on the dark web. And they sell it for two reasons. One is attackers can use that information to go after your partners and your customers because they now have a relationship and they know how many invoices they get paid. So they can do spear phishing.
Yeah.
With them, so they can sell it, or they can just reuse it to attack you again.
I've seen the spear phishing thing work really well. It's bad how good. Like once they have the content, you can make it look perfect.
Yeah, and they take the time now. Like a 2-user dental practice, they will spend 2 or 3 days figuring out, how do I move around in this company? How do I actually make sure I'm going to get paid from this? And for 3 days work, $100,000 payday really isn't that bad. I'm not earning that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you believe, obviously, you've built a whole solution around this. You believe that if the beginning position is no, don't run, whether it's system, kernel, user, admin rights, it doesn't matter, that a lot of these different attack angles, which honestly, I didn't even think about half the ones that you brought up, would be blocked.
I think that's the point. You can't think of every angle of attack. So if you start with least privilege across the board, you remove so much risk from your business. But if you apply a zero trust approach and all of these, you take away all of these unknowns, and now you're in your little comfort zone of I know. And imagine someone's trying to break into your house. You've got 21 windows around your house. You're on shaking, you're nervous. Imagine you got one door, there's a bolt on it, and that's the only way it's coming in. It's a lot easier to defend that house if there's one door and a bolt on it than it is if there's 21 windows. And I say that number because I have 21 windows in my house. And it's much easier to defend. And
how intense is the setup and ongoing maintenance, right? It sounds like you mentioned that there's, you could outsource the approval process so that as people are clicking on stuff, somebody else can manage the process of saying yes or no. But it sounds like there's a fair bit of implementation involved in order to make sure that you either approve all the stuff that you know is good or not, right?
Well, so normally you're not and some MSPs start on I'm going to approve everything manually. Others take a slightly different approach in that they say, we need to draw a line in the sand. We need to figure out where we are. We need to build a list of policies, and we need to draw that line and say no, almost like a no more trust policy. So we've trusted what we've got. And that's how most people approach it. And then they might go back and start deleting things that they don't want. But the default scenario is no more trust. Our most successful implementation is probably 2,000 seats rolled out during a demo. And a week later, they lock down all those clients. Like most MSPs will, if you have that many seats, will stagger it over 4 or 5 weeks. But we're not talking about days or weeks. We're talking about hours of time, like that you're going to invest into this. And it really is going to give you a huge edge. And those hours you're going to get back in the first year. One ransomware attack, one malware attack, one having to remove adware from someone's machine. You've got that back. And you're just not going to do that anymore because you're denying by default and you're in control of the environment. In terms of those approvals, you'll be surprised how few approvals there are. I mean, well, they'll be surprised with a few things. 92% of approvals requests that come into Threatlocker are not approved. So now, not because they're all malware, but some of them are just garbageware, but 92% of requests are not approved by our MSPs. They're denied. They're saying, no, we're not going to approve this request. So that's a little bit terrifying. Approvals take 30 seconds. If you've got 2,000 seats, you're probably not dealing with more than 2 or 3 approvals a day. I mean, how often do people actually install new software in their environment? They don't. It's not something that you do all the time.
Usually it's because somebody sent you something and you don't have the plugin to open the file, or you need some sort of reader or something like that, right? Where it's something that you weren't necessarily expecting it, but like imagine for the first time, and obviously not necessarily now because everybody's been using the major communication platforms, but imagine somebody sending you a Zoom for the first time, right? Or a GoToMeeting or whatever, a WebEx, right? You have to install that plugin in order to get the session running, right? That's the kind of stuff that usually pops up.
Yeah, and as an MSP, most MSPs will take that stuff as a global policy. So the first time Zoom runs, they'll say everyone in all of my customers can run Zoom because it's 2020 and you can't do anything without running Zoom. So those kind of things they'll take globally. So you're going to deal with that once. But here's something interesting. Oh, I mean, we were in the thousands. In March this year, we saw thousands of fake Zoom downloads. Like not hundreds, thousands of them. Like where someone would click on enter this meeting link, and it would download, it would look like a Zoom page, it would download zoom.exe, and then it says, Threatlocker doesn't recognize this. And we're like, Threatlocker knows what Zoom is. We track it. We have a whole team of people to track apps. So when apps update, we know exactly what the hashes are. So Windows updates, Office updates, Chrome updates. So when you download that common app and it says Threatlocker doesn't recognize this, you can go ahead and improve it. You want to start saying, well, wait there. I mean, if this is some bespoke dental software, that's possible, but this is Zoom. Like, why is Threatlocker not recognize it? Well, there was thousands of fake Zoom accounts, fake Zoom links that we saw in March this year. And we've actually just saw a big uptick of them again now.
Wow. You got a lot, because you're working with so many MSPs, I'm sure you get a lot of visibility on like a macro level, right? Of how people are trying to get in, right?
Well, we log 300 million of rows of data an hour. So you can see that the volume of apps executing and what's going on and the trends we see, like when, and I won't say names, but there was an antivirus that got compromised last year, and they used the antivirus to push out the malware. And we literally saw 30,000 blocks.
I know which one you're talking about. Go ahead.
And it was 30,000 blocks there within a few hours. And we were panicking. Are we blocking this antivirus? So it's those kind of things. It's amazing that you see that just explodes out of control. Like when you see those things pop up.
Wow. No, I mean, listen, I came into this just to have a hallway conversation. I'm intrigued now, right? Because you're right. It's impossible to sit up and think of every single way somebody can get kind of tricked into the first step of a long journey of somebody getting into the system, right? And the problem is, by the time somebody's figured out somebody was in the system, that's probably too late, right?
Yeah. And especially with the speed of computers nowadays, it's always too late. I mean, the one thing I would say is when you're building your security, don't keep piling up one side of the stack and not the other. It's about having controls. It's about having detection. It's about having training, but making sure that if you just do too much of one to compensate for another, it's not going to work. And it's very important to make sure you balance that out rather than just over-investing in one area. And you can't over-invest in security, but disproportionately investing in one area to the other isn't necessarily going to help you the most effective way. And if you look at how a lot of MSPs have adopted zero trust, and when our journey in Threatlocker, when we started selling, we went through, like every other company, we had to go through venture funding and everything else, and everyone slammed the door on our face because they said no MSP is going to use this. But guess what? Well over 1,000 MSPs are using it, and we're not talking about 50 seats here. We're talking about thousands of seats per MSP, and they've fully adopted this, and they're driving their business forward because, yes, your customers complain, but they also understand that the most likely way they're going to go out of business is through a cyber breach.
It's interesting. I got an email this morning from one of the big vendors in the MSP space, and they said, we've surveyed X number of small businesses, and on average, you're willing to spend 30% more per month if they feel that they have the right security offering.
I saw that email too.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, 30%. That's interesting.
I'm not sure where the number came from.
I don't know. But if you work backwards from that number, okay. There's some room to figure some things out there. But no, go ahead.
I don't think, of course, as a CEO of a company, I am always going to try and negotiate the best price on anything. I'm always going to complain that something's too expensive. And we bought online, we bought a training platform, Udemy yesterday, training platform for all of our staff. So everyone who hires gets access to it. And I went in and I negotiated the price down, and I felt good that I got a discount. But honestly, just like with that platform, I didn't care if it was $1,000 cheaper or yeah, and just like with my IT services, I don't care if I'm paying $100 or $200 a month or $50 a month. What I care about from an IT perspective, from a security perspective, is that one, my users can do their work, two, their equipment works, and three, that they get what they need. And I think being an MSP is sometimes about selling as much as doing, and making sure you communicate that to your customers and you make them feel good. Because the reality is, I mean, it costs a lot of money to hire people. Their tools not being available for a day in a month is just going to annihilate your entire cost. Like, I mean, that's it. So it's important to know and make sure you can articulate that to your clients and you can show them the value and security. They don't want to go out of business. And yes, they're always going to beat you up on price, just like I beat Udemy up on price yesterday. But, I felt good that, I saved a bit of money, but it wasn't, I wasn't buying them because I was buying it because it was the best platform, and customers are doing the same with their IT. They want to make sure that they've got the best platform. They want to make sure it's working, and they want to make sure that they're secure, and their business isn't going to fail because their computers let them down.
No, it's fair point. I don't think anybody will argue that. Danny, how do people find you, get more information, learn more about zero trust approach? I mean, there's a lot there. And quite frankly, this is one of the more informational sessions I've done recently. I mean, it definitely opens up your thinking for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would really recommend a 45-minute demo. Go on to threatlocker.com. Just book a 45-minute demo. If nothing else, you get to learn more information about how it works. So you do that, and we can show you a demo. Also, I'm not going to disclose what it is. The rumor mills are running heavy on Facebook, but we have a special announcement next week. I believe it's going to be announced on Wednesday. So watch out for that, because we have a new product in the MSP space targeted toward MSPs that's going to make control even easier and at different levels as well. So watch out for that product as well in that announcement.
Cool. Sounds interesting. I'm going to pay attention now too. Appreciate your time today. For everybody that jumped on board, this whole session was recorded. There's some good nuggets out of here, right? Even if you're not interested, but I definitely made me interested after I learned things. So you can rewind, fast forward, download, play on mspinitiative.com. That's where the session will show up, as long as all the other sessions that we've done. Come back again Tuesdays and Thursdays for MSP Initiative Live, 1:00 Eastern time, New York time. Obviously, we have the holidays coming up, so we're going to take a 2-week break towards the end of the month, give everybody some downtime to relax and close out their year, and then we'll be back again in January. But we still got a handful of sessions left, so stay tuned. Danny, appreciate you for coming on board, and we'll probably have you back for some security panels coming up, because man, you've been through it. You know what's going on for sure.
Well, thank you.
All right, cheers. Have a good one.